on all platforms, I'm the Paranormal Files. That was the thing that kind of got me started online, and the paranormal's been my passion for yeah, a long time. I grew up in a haunted house. I have had a million crazy experiences that I still to this day cannot explain.
Well, I want to hear about all of them. Why'd you cut your
Absolutely.
luxurious hair? That stuff was stunning.
I go back and forth, man. Like I've had a bowl cut in the past with super bleached hair. That was cool. I got that in LA back in 2019. When I got married, my hair was down to my nipples. It was kind of like a Tarzan look, but I actually just got a haircut last week. I'm
It
trying
looks
to
good, buddy. I'm not saying it doesn't look good. I think it looks stunning, but that was luxurious hair. That was some herbal essence hair in that
It's like
picture.
Samson, I lost my power
No
when I
way,
cut it.
buddy. You're still crushing it. You're still crushing it. So go check it out. Links below. Where do you want to start, Colin? Where would you like to start?
It's up to you, man. I mean, we could talk about paranormal for a little bit
Well, I
if
would
you
love
want
to
move
hear
into
about
that.
you since it's in your background, kind of talking about some of the experiences you had.
You
growing
grew up in a
and-
haunted
yeah, I
house.
would love
Johnny
to hear
doesn't
about
believe in any of that stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about. I believe in all of that
I've
stuff.
told Johnny about how my house had psychic issues.
No, I
and
don't believe you're a psychic. That's what I don't believe.
I am a psychic. I have psychic ability. I come from psychics.
Psychotic ability.
We have a baby who can see dead people. This is true stuff. Okay, but Johnny doesn't believe there was magical powers in my house.
I don't believe you had a hat that you could put things under and watch them disappear.
No,
I don't believe that.
it did happen.
It's called your babysitter doing magic. Is what that's called.
Okay, maybe she did magic too. But the point is, Johnny's a skeptic. I'm not. I'm on
not
your
a skeptic
side.
about ghosts at all. He's lying.
Okay, so why don't you tell us, when did you realize that your house was haunted? Now, this was your childhood house?
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting. Growing up, I lived in three different houses. So the first two were not haunted by any metric. We never had any really crazy experiences, even though I found out later on that the house that I actually was in right after I was born, after we moved out, it became abandoned. And then there was a murder in there. This is back in South Dakota. They actually discovered that someone had been running a meth lab in my old house, and things got heated one night, you could say, and someone got stabbed to death. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, that's just a random side kind of tangent. But when I was in high school, my parents built our house. This was built on land that had never been developed before in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Obviously, South Dakota, there's a lot of land and a lot of space to build a lot of stuff. And the very first day that we moved into the house, I'm talking about like bringing the boxes into the home. We left my sister inside of the house, and my parents and I went to go grab other boxes from our old house. And by the time we came back, she was trying to crawl out of the window of her bedroom. She had locked herself in her room, and she said that she heard men moving boxes around and making noises and talking inside of our house.
How old was she at this point?
I was 14 or 15, so she would have been about 10. So right off the bat, I mean, that's just really strange. But,
That is crazy. That is crazy.
We thought, yeah, that's weird, but this place can't be haunted. Like, we just built it. And
You built the house and you thought it was, and it was already haunted? That's crazy, right?
dude, so we end up, obviously, we're living in the house, and things start to happen to my sister and I. The way that the house was set up was that my room was down here, my sister's room was across the hall. There was a hallway and then like an open floor plan, and then my parents' room on the other side of that. So down at our end of the hallway, that's where all the stuff would happen. I had things move off of my shelves. We'd hear noises in the middle of the night, scratching on the walls, just kind of typical weird shit. But this one night, the night that really convinced me that there was something terrifying going on, I was in my bed and I'm just sitting there late at night, and I hear some noises in the kitchen because, like I said, it's an open floor plan. So if you have the door open, you can hear anything in the kitchen. And I thought I heard my mom's voice, so I yelled out and asked, like, "Mom?" Like, said something to her, and I heard her say, "Yeah, I'm coming," like something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, well, my mom's coming down to my room. So I hear these footsteps approaching all the way down that long hallway. And the moment that whatever this was got to my door, the footsteps stopped. No one came around the corner. And I heard this thing like drop down on all fours and scratch like this on my carpet all around my bed in like a circle. And I literally got up out of my bed, turned my phone light on, and I was like, "What the fuck, mom?" And put the phone light on the side of the bed. Moment I did that, the noises stopped, and my sister came out of her room and was asking what I just witnessed. And yeah, needless to say, my parents were asleep at the time, and that's something that still really freaks me out because I don't understand what
Yeah.
that is, whether that's a mimic, doppelganger, whatever you want to call that type of energy that mimics people. That really frightens me. We can talk about that later. But it just kept building. My sister kept seeing things and hearing things, and stuff would be moved around in her room. And I had friends that refused to come over to my house because they all had experiences. At one point, I saw in a sleep paralysis type state. I woke up in my bed and my blinds used to be set up in such a way, or my window, I should say, that it was right next to my bed and you could see the moon at certain points in the night coming through the blinds. And so this specific night when I woke up, I'd always wake up with this weird feeling. And on this night, I looked over towards the blinds. You could see the moon. And then there was a shadow of what appears to be a man wearing a cowboy hat standing by my window. And I'm sitting there thinking like, I need to fucking do something right now. Like, this is horrifying. What can I do? And I can't because I'm under sleep paralysis. So like literally I couldn't move my body. And I was just
Whoa.
sitting there, watch this thing as it came closer and closer. And it was like a horror film where it didn't walk, it just slowly glided towards me.
That's
And then at the very
crazy.
last second, when it was about to like touch me, I was able to move and I snapped and I turned my light on. Boom, gone. So that was kind of the last the tipping point really of when I told my parents we need to call somebody. And weirdly enough, we had a family friend who was a psychic, and at around that same time, she out of the total blue, completely randomly called my mom and said, "Hey Mary, I was just driving by your guys' house and I wanted to tell you I felt like there's these two male energies in your home. I know it's new and I don't want to, freak you guys out, but I just wanted to tell you that." And so hearing that response from this family friend psychic who's been like a very close friend of ours for years, that really freaked us out. And so my parents started hearing things, everybody's hearing stuff and seeing stuff. And my mom and I decided to go down to the courthouse in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and actually comb through records. And this was the most crazy, just wild thing that I think, one of them at least, that I've ever experienced. We get down to the courthouse, we meet with the historian, they take us back into the room with the archives and all the land deeds and everything. And we find our original deed and all the map of the land for all the people that lived there before us. And the historians there were able to tell us that there was a family that had lived on that plot of land, not exactly where our house was, but just right in that immediate area. And there were four of them. And the mother and daughter had death and burial records, but the father and son did not have death or burial records that they could find. They pulled these out and were showing these to us. I got this all on camera. I never did anything with the footage, but one day I hope
And
to.
how old were you when this was happening? When you're talking to these people?
I was probably 15 or 16 at the time. So we lived in the house about 6 months to a year. So yeah, I'd say probably 15.
Damn, you're
This,
already recording everything. You already know that to do that. That's crazy. Okay, go
yeah,
on.
dude.
Sorry.
So we get all that information, and that completely corroborated what the psychic had told us about the two male spirits. The historians said that they believed that, if there's no death and no burial records, back in the day in Sioux Falls, they didn't have specifically like a city cemetery established yet, because it was like pioneer type settlements. And she thought that either they were buried somewhere near the city cemetery where it eventually ended up, or that they were buried on our property, um, which is really bizarre because over the years it had been built up and there was tons of dirt that had been moved into the area. So it was kind of a built up hill. There was actually an old well that was on our property from back then. And when they tested it, they found arsenic in the water, which was just a weird kind of twist. But eventually, to wrap this whole thing up, the psychic, who's our friend, her name was Donna. She brought two other friends of hers that all had some form of clairvoyancy, and they attempted to do a house cleansing. And they walked room through room. There's a whole bunch of crazy shit that I could talk about that happened during that whole ceremony, but they finished it out and said, okay, we think that these spirits or energies are going to leave you guys alone now. So after they left, I had friends over that evening because it just so happened to be my birthday. So my friends were over and we were hanging out. And at about 2 or 3 in the morning, we heard this, what sounded like someone walked up to our window downstairs and just banged on it as loud as they could, or as hard as they could with their fist. It shook the whole fucking house. My parents ran downstairs. They thought that, we had broken something. And my friends who are skeptics, they all heard it and they couldn't explain it. The next morning we went out and looked because it had been snowing. My birthday is like the middle of December. And there was no pigeon, no deer tracks, no bird that had, slammed into the window and died. And this is the weirdest part. The next day at lunch, we go to my favorite restaurant in Sioux Falls for lunch. We walk in, and who's there ordering food? It's the three psychics. And those three women had all gotten together because they had heard a bang on their window at about 2 or 3 in the morning. And they actually told us that information before we told them. And so it turned into this whole thing where we're all like, what the hell was that? Like, that's the craziest shit ever. And yeah, they interpreted that as a sign that the energy was leaving, that this whole thing was going to be over, but it was far from over. And it ended up at some points making this thing even more violent and aggressive. At one point, it chased my dad around our house when he was home alone. And he actually pulled out a pistol and was going room to room because he thought someone had broken in. And yeah, we eventually sold the house. We did another cleansing ceremony and tried to, rid the energy from the property before we sold it. But my family has not reached out to the current owners, so I don't really know exactly what the situation's like anymore. There's a lot more to that story, but that's kind of the very bare bones version of it.
That's crazy if that's the bare bones version of that.
Yeah.
Because that's pretty nuts.
It's insane.
My house, we had a time where our babysitter named Deborah Sinaccio, she was the Sinaccios. They were good friends with our family, still are. And she would babysit us when we were really young. And one night, man, she was babysitting and we just kept hearing knocks on the windows. And we go outside, there's nobody there. Knock, knock, knock. We were like, what the fuck is that? Then we go lay down, another window, knock, knock, knock. I'm like, what is going on? We go outside, we see nobody, to the point she had to call her sister over.
That's so weird, dude.
Right? So when he said that, I go, oh, man, that's happened to us. It's definitely weird. Definitely, I'm telling you, there's some psychic stuff. Again, I'm from upstate New York. We've had somebody on Seance who wrote a book on seance, and she was like, upstate New York has a lot of paranormal, psychic stuff. There's like a lot of the occult came out of upstate New York, the Rochester area, and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm totally down with that. Like, what is your thoughts on what this energy is? I don't know if you're a spiritual man. I don't know if you're a religious man or any of that stuff. We've had multiple people on with multiple different theories. Some people think it's Nephilim. Some think it's ghost spirits. Some people might believe in simulation, that they are old programs that haven't died. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of hard to actually give you my thoughts because after doing this for so many years now and, paranormal investigating hundreds of locations, I know that it's real, but I just don't know what it could possibly be. Because in some instances, we've had full-on conversations with these energies or spirits, whatever you want to call them, and they've led us to discover things that were previously unknown at some of these haunted locations. There was even one ghost hunt. I hate calling it ghost hunting because I feel like it cheapens the whole thing, but I mean, it's just what it is, essentially. We did this one investigation last year And it's at this place called Malvern Manor in Iowa. It was an old kind of nursing home. They had a psych ward in there, tons of misery, some really horrible stories about former patients and sexual abuse that was rampant in that building. But we did this whole session and we were asking, is there something you'd like to show us in here? Is there something you'd like us to find? And they have this whole blood stain on the wall. It's a
What?
famous part of the building. Yeah, it's like a big the owner thought that it was somebody who got stabbed and they were spurting blood out of the wound and walking along the wall. The place was abandoned for a few years, so they think that it happened during that time.
Ugh.
But so we actually took luminol in there, and we sprayed luminol all over the blood stains. And sadly,
what exactly is luminol?
It's it's reactive
It's that-
to blood.
okay,
So
no,
when you
yeah.
it makes it show up on our UV light.
yeah. So essentially, we were testing to see if the blood was actually blood. It glows like a bright bioluminescent blue, and none of that blood lit up. So we kind of thought, that sucks. We don't want to tell him that that's what we found because he was super excited to see it glow. But later on that night, we're asking the spirits, like, is there something you want to show us? And it brings us to this closet, and this is all on fucking camera. Like, dude, you can't make this shit up. And it kept talking about this closet, and we heard this like tapping noise inside the closet. We caught this on camera. And so I just had a thought in the back of my head, and I thought, why don't we get the luminol again and spray inside the closet? So we get the luminol. This is all on camera. We open the door and spray the door inside the closet. Whole thing lights up with like a gigantic, what looks like a blood splatter, all covering the closet door.
Gosh.
Yeah, and we asked the owner, like, what the hell could that possibly be? And he said it looked possibly like a suicide, or maybe somebody was, it was in the psych ward area, so maybe they had gone crazy to some degree and had cut themselves and smeared substances on the wall and inside the closet. He still doesn't know. I mean, there's no way to really know because, especially in a lot of those old buildings and facilities, the records don't exist either intentionally or unintentionally. So yeah, I think that there's an intelligent element to these hauntings and to these spirits, but there are also, experiences that I've had and cases that we've investigated where it does not seem intelligent at all. It's like just a replaying tape, if that makes sense. It's weird. It depends on the place. It depends on the thing that you're investigating. And when I started my paranormal journey, one of my big things that I kind of set out to go against was demons, because everybody in the paranormal would use the word demons. And I always thought, I just don't really believe in these horned beasts that are coming out and attacking people. And so at the beginning, I wasn't searching for that activity. And as the years went on, I ended up having a couple of these core experiences where these things, using our devices and actually just like the evidence that we were gathering without the gadgets, it relayed that it wasn't human. And as a little backstory to me, I actually got sober about a year and a half ago, and it was a long journey before that. And the experiences that I had off camera dealing with what some people would call demonic activity, I just call it nowadays non-human energy forms, non-human negative energy forms. I've discovered in my mind that that's very, very real. And it's very frightening based on just things that followed me, things that happened. But I do think a good amount of the paranormal activity is human energy. Like, it's not something that people need to be necessarily very afraid of when it comes to ghost hunting programs and, paranormal YouTube channels and TV shows. I know almost everybody that's on YouTube and on TV, and it's like, it's scary because you're going into these buildings that are abandoned. They can be dangerous. Like, I've almost been stabbed filming videos and had fucking crazy encounters with like homeless people, but that's its own thing. But they're always made to be a little bit scary. But 90% of the houses that we investigate or places that we visit, they're not necessarily this terrifying energy. It's just energy. It's sometimes it's really good vibes. Like, we've had investigations where we started crying, and we've had investigations where the ghost was spelling out jokes to us. We just did an investigation 2 weeks ago where we actually played Pictionary with a spirit. It was fucking insane. We used a pencil and did this whole thing to see if it would draw something out, and it ended up drawing something, and we guessed it. In the moment that we guessed the right answer out loud, all of our devices lit up. It was like, it was crazy. But yeah, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, it was a great answer.
Not what I'm
We
getting
love
across.
long ansans.
Dude, I can't imagine Sam Tripoli as a ghost telling you jokes. You went into Sam's house.
What if I was a prop comic?
Can I ask you quickly? You mentioned you had a conversation, or you've had conversations with ghosts. Now, is that using tech like voice boxes and things like that, or something else? I'm curious what you meant by that.
Well, I've used the tech. Obviously, we use that with all of our investigations, but I've caught voices that obviously were not mine. Being alone in locations, I've used the Ouija boards and all the different seance techniques. Even I've tried out table tipping and using pendulums and working with psychics who have actually channeled. That was a crazy one that we did last year. We actually worked with a woman whose husband builds. Well, she and her husband built these devices they used to communicate with whatever they considered to be the afterlife. So they have these like 3D printed paranormal divination devices that they made. And so her husband died, I believe, a year and a half ago. And so when we were there filming at her house, which she offers up people to come and rent, we asked her, would you ever want to use one of these devices with us? Because they're so intriguing, but we don't know how to use them. And she volunteered, said, oh, yeah, let's do this. So she actually, now there's lots of skeptics and people who absolutely hated it and said that it was total bullshit and the woman was faking it. But she sat there for about an hour in a deep trance after doing a whole meditation procedure and getting into this energy. And she communicated verbally like what the spirit was trying to tell her out loud to us. So in a way, it was like literally we were sitting there talking to her, but her voice changed and she was relaying, what she felt like the spirit was telling her. There's lots of opinions on that whole thing, but yeah, that was really interesting because I'm the type of person where I'm always down to try push the limits of what paranormal investigating is. And it's cool to try all these experiments, man. Like I've even done like alien connection experiments that were fucking wild, like seeing things like UFOs come out of these experiments. I was in a forest in Romania and I saw that's a whole different story, but there's so many different ways that you can try to communicate. And we've done, just about all of them. If you find one that we haven't done, please let me know because I'm dying to try it.
So I have a question. I feel like if I went hunting for the first time, I wouldn't catch anything. And Sam's told me the more you go, the more they're comfortable with you. Would you agree with that? Like,
I don't remember saying that.
Is that something you said?
Maybe it wasn't you, but I remember you telling me. I mean, no, because we talked about those ghost hunters.
Ghost hunting tips while I'm away?
No, but what I do say is if you don't believe it, you won't see it.
Yeah,
you have to believe it's possible.
I remember because these ghost hunting kids went on Rogan's podcast, and I told you about it. And I remember, maybe you don't remember, but you told me like, the more you go, the more they're comfortable coming at you. Because the kid said that he didn't get nothing the first time. He's like, but no, I kept going, and these things kept coming at me, and like they get more dangerous the more you go. I feel like if we went the first time, it'd be like, I wouldn't believe it. But I said, the more you go, maybe the more they come out. Would you agree with that or no?
Yeah, man, it's really interesting because I feel like it's kind of like with anything in life. If you have an open mind about something, you're going to find more success with it. Like, for example, if you go into a paranormal investigation and you're already extremely skeptical, you don't want to really be there, you have a bad energy or a vibe about you, the spirits or energy that's already in that building, they are not going to want to come and speak with you. And I know that sounds insane, and I don't claim to be a paranormal expert, but I've done so many ghost hunts, and the times when I've brought these people that are like incredibly skeptical, you just don't get the evidence. And It sounds like a cop-out way to say like, oh, the skeptic came along and we didn't get anything. Like that's because it's all fake. But it's really not like that because I did a whole web series with the New York Post. It was called Haunted, Abandoned, and Hella Creepy. And we went to, I think it was 6 places in New York. 5 of the episodes with the different reporters, they all experienced this paranormal activity, and we weren't setting anything up. We were just going to these haunted, abandoned spots and investigating. And these reporters that came with us, with the crew every time. They said, wow, like that was way more activity than I thought we'd get. And it's really made me rethink, ghost hunting shows in general. But the one skeptic that we brought, we didn't have barely anything happen. And that's because the entire time, whenever something would happen, he would immediately fire something off like, oh yeah, that just, that had to be the wiring, or no, that was just the house making a creak, and that type of vibe and that type of energy, I feel like is not conducive to a good paranormal investigation, if that makes sense.
It does. Again, you're never going to see Bigfoot if you don't believe in Bigfoot. You're never going to see cryptids if you don't believe in cryptids. And you're never going to see conspiracy if you don't believe in conspiracy. It's just the way it is. You have to be open-minded. You have to somewhat keep your head on a swivel, and you have to be open-minded that's out there. And, a lot of skeptics come from the big city because you don't see a lot of this stuff in the big city. And I think that's because of all the electricity. All these wires, everybody's got like Wi-Fi everywhere. I think that does a lot of damage to seeing anything astral projecting, any of the paranormal, and I think that's a big umbrella. You're not going to see any of that stuff in the big city. It's just not. There's only one cryptid, Mothman. Mothman goes to Chicago and bangs in Chirac. That's about it. You never hear anybody else there because they just don't go there. And because they don't go there, and the majority of our population, which I don't know if you'd say the majority, but seems like most of it live in big cities, right?
That would make something make sense that has puzzled me, because cities should be absolutely swarmed with ghosts, because there's no places that more people have died than cities, right?
Right.
But that would kind of make. I mean, you do hear ghost stories around the old hotels and stuff, but that would make a lot of sense actually if it was there was something that wasn't conducive to their appearance.
But what I found interesting about your story earlier is how something was built and then it was haunted, because we constantly live in a time where they're just tearing down the old. Whether you think it's done to make money to build a new house, or they're tearing down our history, Tataria and all that stuff. When I always wondered, when you tear down the old, do you release those spirits? Are those spirits attached to the building where the episode happened? Or if you build a new building, do they step right in? It sounds like they could step right in.
Yeah, that's that's just something I don't really understand, because a lot of these buildings that we investigate, buildings that I've gone to, are, old, decommissioned insane asylums or hospitals, places that have had this sustained history of grief and suffering and just, terrible events. But I've also investigated locations that were brand new, places that were built, whether it was on the foundation of an old building that used to be haunted, or I've been called by people to investigate, their houses where there's absolutely zero bad energy and, or bad history, I should say. And those places have been just as haunted as these old insane asylums. Like, I've even investigated old hospitals. Like, I was just in England last August filming, and we filmed at this old hospital, and it had been there since like the 1600s, I want to say, and so many deaths, thousands of deaths, and all these horrible things. But we barely heard a single sound or had a fluctuation of any energy or any responses. In fact, one of the places that was the least haunted that I've ever been to was Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia. We rented that entire place out for the night, and I swear to God, the entire time I was there, we didn't have one piece of evidence. We didn't hear one noise, not one bit of energy detected, not one response on any of our devices. It was crazy, because you'd expect a place that's seen so much violence and bloodshed and just the mental turmoil and torture of a location like Eastern State. You'd expect the energy to be off the charts. But I tell this to people all the time to kind of wrap this up. When you interview these people, I've interviewed hundreds of people who live and work at these haunted locations. And when you actually sit down and interview them, they give you a whole tour of this property, but they usually have about 3 or 4 like really good paranormal stories. And this is coming from somebody who's spent the last 17 years, taking care of this building, and they've been there almost every day of the week, working, giving tours, remodeling, doing all of this. and they walk away with a handful of stories. So it's not something where you're going to go to, an abandoned asylum and see like a ghostly nurse walking down the hall. It's not guaranteed. It's actually very, very rare to find these genuine like apparitions or poltergeist activity, physical manifestations. But it has happened, and I've seen it a couple times, like those really life-changing experiences. It's just rare.
I've been at the world famous Comedy Store for 27 years. I'm not there as much as I used to, but I was there for a long time, almost every night. And I've seen maybe two ghost things, but I did see them, and I found them very interesting. So I understand what you're saying. There's also something to me about a death. And, there's this thing is like when you die, does your soul get reabsorbed into the energy of the universe, right? And when we see so many of these ghost situations, these hauntings involve somewhat violent endings, I sometimes think it could be that the ending is so violent that it disrupts the energy being reabsorbed by the universe, and now it's kind of stuck neither here nor there, and you got kind of these energies roaming the area to do something and just to try to figure out a way to get back to where it's supposed to be, which is to be reabsorbed. Which I don't know what the answer to that is. How do you reabsorb a spirit back into the universe? It's an interesting thing for sure, man, and I love it. I find it, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. I can't remember the name of this place where this happened, but you see all the time with the paranormal, definitely like violent deaths and even sometimes bizarre deaths. Those leave marks and stains. Murder obviously is a huge contributor to a haunting. Some of the most haunted places that I've ever investigated were crime scenes or even places where people had taken their own lives. That's definitely just a horrible, sad energy. But talking about like intelligent spirits and like how you're saying, what's the process of getting back into the ether or wherever we come from? There's a story in Pennsylvania about these people that were seeing these ghosts. I believe it's called Murphy's Cross, but don't quote me on that. I visited the area like years ago, but essentially these people were seeing these like railway workers, like their spirits in the woods in this area in Pennsylvania. And this one guy was apparently led by the spirit of a railway worker, and he led him into the woods and essentially like pointed at the ground. And when they dug in that area, the farmers started digging. They actually unearthed a mass grave of railroad workers who had been murdered by their boss. It's a whole thing, and they actually researched the story, and it turned out that somebody had gotten, I believe it was cholera, and so instead of risking everyone getting infected, the guy who was running the project actually had a couple of these guys whacked and buried in this mass grave, and their relatives had been looking for them for years, but they took these bones out of the ground. They brought them to a forensic analyst, and they had them at a university for a while. The people at the university saw the spirits of these railroad men. And then they reburied them all with their names on a proper marker, like a giant cross in a cemetery in Pennsylvania. And no one's ever seen the spirits since. So that's like a story of they were actually wanting something, and then they led someone to what they wanted. And then when they got that proper burial and people discovered the history behind how they had died, it seems as if they actually moved on. And that's a story that's always blown my mind. And I've heard a lot of stories like it, but that one is crazy. It's pretty well documented. They even have a historical plaque about it in the town that it's in.
It's so interesting, dude.